Ever get that feeling, when you're standing in front of some piece of art, maybe someplace like True Grit Art Gallery over in Middleboro, Massachusetts, and your brain just goes, what is this? Like you're completely lost.
Yeah, or even that thought that pops up, my kid could totally do this.
Exactly. You're not alone. Abstract art, right? Sometimes it feels like it's speaking a different language.
A language a lot of us haven't really learned.
And that's kind of the whole point of this deep dive we're doing. We're going back in time, back to when art was a little more, down to earth, a little easier to grasp. We're going to see how art started shifting, those little steps that led to abstract art.
It's like figuring out the roots of something, right? See where it all began.
Exactly. Maybe then, when we see abstract art, we won't just feel that initial, what is this? Maybe we'll see something more. We're using art history, of course, all that good stuff, but also thinking about like real life experiences with art. Like what happens when you walk into a gallery like True Grit,
Right. Because experiencing art in person is totally different from just reading about it in a book.
So let's rewind the clock. Go back to the 1870s, Paris. Think Impressionism, artists like Monet.
Monet, yeah, he was all about capturing the light, those fleeting moments.
Like his haystacks, right?
Yeah, same haystacks, different times of day, different light, completely different vibe.
Totally changes how you feel about them. And Renoir, think about his picnic scenes. All those people, but the edges are like blurred.
Kind of soft and hazy, not super sharp and realistic.
The point wasn't to make a perfect copy of what they saw.
It wasn't like taking a photograph, it was more about the impression.
Yeah. The feeling, the atmosphere, the mood. It went from, what is this, to, how does this make you feel?
Exactly. And speaking of Impressionism, there's this guy, Camille Pissarro. He gets overlooked sometimes.
Yeah, not as famous as Monet, but he was doing some really interesting stuff.
There's this book, Abstract Pissarro, and it makes a pretty strong case that he was like a trailblazer, one of the first to really push towards abstraction.
Really? What makes them say that?
Well, take his later work, like Boulevard Montmartre at night. It's a street scene, but it's almost like it's dissolving into these patches of color.
I can picture it, like all those lights and the movement.
Yeah, it's all broken down into these little dabs and dashes, like it's humming with energy. Not totally abstract, but you can see how the paint itself is becoming the main thing.
So you have Impressionism loosening things up, right? Not so focused on realistic details. And then you have Pissarro starting to explore what paint can do on its own.
Right, like giving the paint a voice, letting it express something.
And then from there, we move into the 1880s. Symbolism. Totally different vibe. This is all about the internal world, dreams, emotions, all that.
Like Odilon Redon's Closed Eyes. It's this hazy face done in pastels, almost like a dream. There's no clear story there.
More like a feeling, a mood.
Right, and that's kind of the point. Symbolism showed that art doesn't need a straightforward narrative to be powerful.
It's like those times you're in True Grit and someone's looking at a piece and they're like, what does it mean?
Yeah, they're expecting a clear answer story. But symbolism was already saying, hey, meaning doesn't always have to be literal.
It can be about feeling, right? About evoking something.
Yeah.
And then boom, you've got Cézanne coming in during the 1890s, shaking things up even more.
Cézanne, yeah, he was starting to play with perspective in a big way, like the basket of apples. It's like he's showing you the basket from multiple angles at once.
Kind of distorted, right?
Yeah, and his paintings of Mont Saint-Victoire, this mountain, they're broken down into these almost geometric shapes.
Not how you'd normally see a mountain.
He wasn't interested in just copying what he saw. He was more interested in the structure, the underlying forms. That's why he's often called the father of modern art,
He was really pushing the boundaries of what painting could be.
So if you're in True Grit and you see a piece that seems a bit off, maybe the perspective is weird or things are broken up, you're seeing Cézanne's influence.
Like he opened the door for all these new ways of seeing. And then, this focus on form, on the elements of art themselves, it really takes hold with formalism in the early 1900s.
Yeah, like Roger Fry, he had this big exhibition in 1910 with Cézanne's work. That was a turning point.
Really putting Cézanne in the spotlight.
And then in 1914, you have Clive Bell, and he comes up with this idea of significant form. Basically, what he's saying is that what makes art is the way the visual elements are arranged, the lines, the shapes, the colors. It's not about what the art is showing. It's about the feeling you get from those elements.
So, like, the meaning is in the form itself.
Exactly. The baggage of real life, the story, the subject matter, that becomes less important.
And that brings us to the big bang of abstract art, the pioneers, around 1911 to 1917.
The ones who really went all in on abstraction.
Yeah, like Wassily Kandinsky. His composition V from 1911, it's just pure color and form.
And he talked about how he was trying to create color storms in his paintings, like he was treating color like music.
So art could be like music, not about representing something you see, but evoking a feeling or idea.
Yeah, he thought art could bypass all that representational stuff and go straight for the emotional and spiritual, just like music does.
Direct connection, boom. And then you've got probably one of the most famous abstract works, Kazimir Malevich's Black Square from 1915.
Just a black square on a white canvas, so simple, so radical.
That's like, what is art, really? Is it just about depicting the world?
Malevich was like, nope, it can be about pure form, pure idea. It was a total reset.
And then there's Pete Mondrian, his composition with red, blue, and yellow from 1917. Those grids, so precise, those primary colors.
He was searching for harmony, like some kind of universal visual language.
Reducing things down to the most basic elements.
So even though these early abstract works can seem really out there, they were building on what came before, what Cézanne and the symbolists were doing, pushing those ideas even further. And, it wasn't just men making these breakthroughs. Women were right there in the thick of it, shaping abstract art.
For sure. We have to acknowledge the women who were pioneers in abstract art right from the beginning. Like Natalia Goncharova, she developed Rayonism in the 1910s. She was trying to capture light and movement, like space was being sliced and diced.
It wasn't about objects anymore, it was about the forces around them. And Lyubov Popova, in the 1920s, her Space Force constructions, they had this industrial look, almost like architecture.
Reflecting the changing world, all those machines and buildings.
And then there's Leonora Carrington, more known for surrealism, but her Horses of Lord Candlestick from the 1930s, it uses these abstract forms to tap into those dream-like subconscious ideas.
She shows how abstract art could mix with other styles, adding these layers of meaning.
And speaking of layers, after World War II, we land in New York, the 1940s and 1950s, and it's all about abstract expressionism. Big names, big personalities like Jackson Pollock.
Oh yeah, Pollock, those famous drip paintings. Think Autumn Rhythm from 1950. It's like he's dancing on the canvas.
The whole process was part of the art, the energy, the movement.
And then there's Rothko, Number 61, Rust and Blue, from 1953, these giant canvases filled with color.
Like you could just step into them. He was going for these deep, emotional, and even spiritual experiences.
And Willem de Kooning, his Woman Eye from those early 50s, super intense, those brush strokes, like he's attacking the canvas.
Still a figure there, but so distorted, so full of energy. He's blurring the lines between abstract and representational.
And, of course, like you said earlier, women were making huge contributions during this time, too, like Lee Krasner, the Seasons from 1957, all those swirling colors.
Yeah, there's this raw energy in her work, like you can feel the emotion pouring out.
And Helen Frankenthaler, she did Mountains and Sea in 1952, and she invented this soak stain technique, pouring thinned paint right onto the canvas.
It's like the color becomes part of the canvas itself, all luminous and airy.
Totally new way of working with paint. And then Joan Mitchell, Ladybug from 1957, she's capturing the power of nature with these bold colors and brush strokes.
You can almost feel the wind, the movement, even though it's abstract.
So abstract expressionism, it's not just about form anymore. It's about emotion, about the artist's process, all on a grand scale.
A real high point for abstract art. And then in the 60s, things shift again. Minimalism comes along with artists like Agnes Martin and her grids, and then pop art. Think Warhol and his soup cans.
Yeah.
They're playing with these ideas of abstraction and representation in different ways.
It never stops evolving. And that brings us to contemporary abstract art right here, right now in 2025. Artists are doing some really cool things. Some are creating these layered, complex pieces. Others are working with forms that seem to almost disappear. And speaking of contemporary abstract art, we've got a talented local artist showing right here in Middleboro, Kelly Russo.
Oh, I've heard good things about her work.
Kelly Russo, she's a great example of how abstract art is alive and well, happening in our own communities. She's originally from Boston, got her BFA and Master's in Art, Ed from Massachusetts College of Art. She's a gallery artist at South Shore Art Center, a juried artist at Copley Society, and a signature member of the National Association of Women Artists. Her work is, like, so vibrant and fluid.
I like that, vibrant and fluid.
And she describes it as organizing chaos. That's a quote from her statement for her new exhibit, Elements of curiosity.
Organizing chaos. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. It speaks to that tension between control and letting go that you see in a lot of abstract art.
Totally. And for Kelly, her art is super connected to her life, being a mom, an artist, dealing with all the things life throws at you.
Like finding that balance, right?
Yeah, and you see it in her work, the bold shapes, the subtle ones, how the colors and spaces interact, sometimes bright and in your face, sometimes quiet and mysterious. It's like the different layers of our lives.
There's that idea of layers again.
Her work feels so dynamic, like she's playing with intention and chance on the canvas.
That push and pull between control and spontaneity.
And speaking chance, you have a chance to see her work in person. Kelly Russo's Elements of Curiosity is opening on Saturday, April 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. at True Grit Art Gallery, 38 Center Street, right here in Middleboro. Exhibit runs through May 3rd, 2025.
Awesome. I might have to check that out.
You definitely should. And when you see Kelly's work, you might see those connections to the artists we've been talking about. Maybe you'll see a bit of Pissarro in her brushstrokes, or maybe a hint of Frankenthaler in those fluid colors. It's like this conversation that keeps going, this pulse of abstract art happening right here in Middleboro. So next time you're looking at a piece of art and you're feeling that, what is this? Try changing the question
To what?
to, what's this doing to me? What's it stirring up inside?
Oh, I like that. It's not about figuring out the right answer. It's about how it makes you feel.
Maybe it's not about what it's showing, but about this dialogue between shapes and, like, your soul, which is what I get from Kelly Russo's work. So here's a thought to ponder. This whole journey we've been on, from recognizable forms to pure abstraction, does it reflect something deeper about us?
What do you mean?
Like this need to express what's inside us, to explore the basic elements of experience, even when words aren't enough, when the world we see just doesn't cut it.
That's a good one to think about.
Something to consider next time you encounter a piece of abstract art.